Welcome back to the channel. All right, today in the shop we are working on another Jeep. This time it's a 2000 TJ, just a regular Wrangler. It's a friend of mine's son's, and he bought it from his grandfather, and wants to just try to get it fixed up. It's got some bad brake pulsation. A lot of it is in the pedal and in the steering wheel. This, to my understanding, took a little journey. Took a little journey in neutral by itself. Did a little ghost ride down into a ditch at one point in its life, and it bent up some steering and suspension, and they fixed part of it, but I think just enough to get it to drive. So it's I raised it up in the air, and it's got quite a bit of bent steering linkage. So we're gonna replace the steering linkage, center link, drag link, all that stuff, tie rod ends, sway bar end links. We're gonna just start fresh with all that. Basically just gonna do a minor overhaul on the steering. We're also going to do front rotors and pads, so that we're going to freshen up the brakes there. And we're going to do rear drums and shoes. We're going to flush the brake fluid, get all the old hydraulic fluid out, start from fresh with the fluid as well. It also has a starting issue, and we're going to be doing a crankshaft position sensor. I'm going to replace the crankshaft position sensor because sometimes you get in it and it just spins and spins and spins and doesn't do anything. And you can cycle the key, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't want to crank, and then all of a sudden, boom, it'll crank 5 times in a row. Or sometimes you can play with a key. In my experience in the past, that's been a crankshaft position sensor problem with these 4 liters. Okay, so the crankshaft position sensor reads the rotation of the engine, tells the computer basically when to fire. Okay, so the crankshaft position sensor, I think it tells the coils when to fire. So it measures, basically tells the computer where the engine's at and when to fire. So if it's not picking up at all, it doesn't think the engine's spinning, and it doesn't fire the coils. So it may be the coils and the injectors all together. I can't remember. But what I do remember is these things are notorious for going out. They will cause stalling problems, no crank problems. And anyway, we're gonna start with that. We're gonna put a crankshaft position sensor in it, and see how she runs after that. This thing also has, I've discovered, a battery terminal that doesn't want to tighten up good. So you shouldn't be able to take the battery terminal off without tools. So we're going to try to tighten that up, get that cleaned up, because that'll cause stalling problems. Loose cables on a Chrysler. See that? Just took these both off by hand. That one's closed all the way. Hopefully we can get it to tighten up. I've had countless of cars get towed into my shop over the years and get towed into the dealers when I worked for the dealers. I was a Dodge Jeep Chrysler technician for, I don't know, 8 years. I worked on Volvos at a dealership before that. I owned my own shop for 15 years and have been in the business for my whole life, basically. So, and if you have loose battery cables, it will cause stalling. It'll shut the motor off. Boom. Computer cars do not like loose battery cables. So if you have an intermittent stalling problem, check your battery terminals. If they're corroded, loose is a no-go. You got to have tight connections. Okay. All right, loose grounds too. You can have a ground somewhere loose. Car's been in an accident and it wants to stall or do weird stuff. It could be a ground fault. It could be a loose chassis ground or something. So you gotta have good grounds. Good connections are a must on a computer car. All right, We're gonna get set up. I think the first thing I'm gonna do here is the crankshaft sensor. We're gonna get that out of the way, then we're gonna lift it up and do get started on the steering, get the front wheels off of it, and do the steering and brakes. So it's quite a project. We may break this into 2 videos. One may just be replacing this crankshaft position sensor, and the other may be the whole project where I do the steering linkages and the brakes and all that, and I'll do an alignment afterwards. All right, got quite a bit of work to do on this Jeep. All right, that's the crankshaft position sensor. It has a 2-bolt deal, so it's 2 11 millimeters. Just gotta pull those out and unplug it from up top. All right, so we're looking at the top of the engine, passenger side, which is the right side. Here is the connector for the crank sensor, and it kind of just sits. I already unplugged it, but it sits like right there, like right there. So just basically at the back of the motor. All you have to do is unplug it, follow your wire around, you find the connector. It's not hard. So pull the bolts out, unplug it, then I got to put it back up in the air so I can snake the wiring harness out, and then we'll put the new sensor in. All right, so here's the crank sensor pulled out. Look at all the grease built up on it. It's pretty nasty. I'm gonna attempt to just clean this sensor off and put it back in. I would just put the new one in, but I don't know. There's a problem. I don't know if you see that or not, but it's not the right one. So it's not uncommon if you've ever worked on cars to get the wrong parts from the parts department. It is what it is. I'm gonna clean that thing off and put it back in and see how she runs. The problem I was having was a starting problem, so if it doesn't work, I'll know right off the bat. If it continues, then I'll just go grab another one. All right, so pop that. I cleaned all the grease off that sensor, popped it back in, and hooked the battery back up. And I cranked it up like 5 times in a row, grabbed the camera, and then it went right back to doing the same shit. No big deal. We're gonna get the right crank sensor. So I'll run to the parts store, but first I want to look at the rest of the parts that they gave me, make sure I'm not missing anything, or I don't have to keep running back and forth playing. I ain't got the right parts all damn day long. So I'm trying to keep this light out of the camera lens, not trying to look down my nose at you. Hey, let me just tilt it up. There we go. All right, so I went to the parts store and got new crank sensor. Only problem, the other one, this is for a manual transmission. The other one is for an automatic, but there's about a $70 parts difference in the 2 sensors. Not on my behalf. That's it just cost me. So okay, so I got the front wheels off. Here's your rotor. I mean, that's pretty It's pretty hammered. It's old, rusty. They look thin. You can see it's got a big groove in it. They were bad, warped. Here's the other front rotor. I mean, you see how wasted that thing is. It's hammered. The pads are thick, but we're starting from scratch. We're gonna put new pads and rotors on it. A good ceramic pad. Now you can see here, see how the steering linkage is touching each other all through there? It's pretty bad. I'm gonna raise it up. All right, you can see that there's supposed to be a gap there. That's all bent. It hits and rubs each other as you're trying to drive it. I'm hoping nothing else is majorly bent. We're going to replace both these arms, including the tie rod end. The tie rod end is attached to this one, and we're going to replace the tie rod end here. So it's 3 tie rod ends really, and unless there's a 4th, that might be. Let's see, 1. That one's part of the 2, 3. It should be 3, and then that's the 4th. We'll see. We'll open the boxes and see how it comes, and then we're going to replace the shock, the steering stabilizer as well. That basically just keeps the steering wheel from acting crazy when you hit bumps. So I'm hoping the track bar is not bent. We'll find out. We'll get the steering linkage put on and go from there. I remember now when I looked at it the other day, why I wanted to replace some of these tie rods, the tie rod ends, and I'm not sure if this one is bent or not. This one definitely is, because it's touching this one, but they could both be bent. I don't know together, you know. So, but this one, if you look right here, it's taking a hit pretty hard on the back side of it. So that's no bueno. So this may be bent and this may not be, but I'm pretty sure they're both bent. Cotter pins are kind of mangled. I'll cut that one. Some people use needle nose to play with these. I like to use these cutters, dikes, snips, whatever you want to call them. I can grab a hold of stuff. I can grab them easier, I think, than with a pair of needle nose. And if they get too stubborn, I just cut them off. I keep a big assortment of cotter pins. Sometimes I reuse them, sometimes I don't. These are pretty old looking, so I probably will not reuse any of these. This old Jeep's a little on the crusty, rusty side underneath. It's had some either exposure maybe to the up north or to the beach maybe, or I don't know, maybe it just spent a lot of time splashing through the mud. But it's an older Jeep. It's a 2000, so I mean, you got to think this thing's 20 years old. It's getting up there in age. I don't think these. When I look back, I don't think these are old vehicles, because I worked on these when they were new. I was a factory dealer tech. I mainly did engine stuff, but I was a general tech and light engine. So we did I did all the suspension. Well, I didn't do all the suspension, but I did suspension work, I did trim work, I did engine work, I did just about everything. So I was a general. for the most part. Light engine, we did, you know, head gaskets and valve cover gaskets and, you know, stuff like that, water pumps. Didn't do a whole lot of heavy engine stuff. If we did heavy engine stuff, it usually just replaced an engine, but you know, we did all kinds of stuff. I mean, every day you're working on something all day long. Might be working on 4 or 5 cars a day, excuse me. But these things just, I just don't think of them as old, but they really are. 20 years old. Damn, it makes me old. I was a kid when I was working on these and they're new, so I was, you know, in my 20s, early 20s. So it is what it is. All right, we'll continue to tear this thing down. Oh, there, Mr. Kesselnut. Come on. All right. There we go. That's nice. Well, I may not even take that loose there. It's wanting to spin, and we're really replacing that anyway, so it doesn't have to come off. So I fought with this cotter pin for a while, and finally got it out. And this, you can see how that joint's moving around. I haven't even loosened it yet. Well, I mean, I spun it, but it's not loosening up. You see how that's kind of stuff I'm dealing with, but the nut's spinning, and it doesn't come out of there, so I'm going to try to put some pressure on it while I spin it and see if it'll come out. Come on, baby. I think the pressure from this is going to help, but I'm going to give it a shot. Full power. There goes my light. Hey, we didn't have to cut anything off though. That's good. Sometimes you just give these a crack, they'll come down. Gotta take the steering stabilizer shock out, and I gotta take that one off, and we'll be in business. That one may be fun because I can't get air on it. Hopefully it does not spin. All right. Just pop that bolt out. I need to get that out. It's probably gonna be fun. Got lucky and that one spun off with a ratchet wrench. So I'll just bang that down, and we've got all the steering down. Track bar is going to stay in place. We're going to make sure it's tight because they tend to loosen up, and let the differential slide. I don't see any evidence of it shifting around, but boots on it looks okay. We're going to leave the track bar alone. All right, pop that down. There she blows. Pickle fork to the rescue, and the air hammer. Alright. I bought that little air hammer, I don't know, 20 years ago. It's not strong. It's very controllable. I've got an air control there, and of course the trigger is very fine. I was told this is, it says aerospace tools. It's what they used for building airplanes, putting rivets in and out and stuff. That's what I was told. It's not a very strong one though. If you need brute strength, that's not the one to go to. I do need to get a heavier hitter that I can just blast through some stuff with it, but that one's not. That one does a good job on some stuff, but it's not meant for busting stuff like that loose. But it works. I don't know why I bought it. I was working on cars and just thought it was a good idea because it was super controllable or something, I guess. And some of them, you touch the button, it's just like wide ass open. So I guess that was my thinking behind that, was that it wouldn't tear as much stuff up with it, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to tell what you were thinking 20 years ago. All right, got the steering linkage on the floor. And I'll show you what I found. Okay. So here's what we took out. And you can see this bar here looks pretty straight. If you hold the new one up next to it, I'm trying to do this and show you and hold the camera all by myself. Ugh. It looks pretty straight. This bar is foobarred. All right, you see that? Okay. And she makes a bit of a turn. So that's our main problem. Other than you can see where this took a big whack here. When it comes to steering, this one does look like it has a slight bend in it. I'm putting this new one in anyway. I don't think it's perfectly straight, and you're supposed to be perfectly straight. So we're putting new stuff in. Steering linkage, scrapola. We're gonna scrap that stuff and start fresh on that. It's we still could have bent control arms. Looks like they put a lower control arm on the driver's side. Starting to get some bushing wear on the lower control arm on the passenger side, so the right lower control arm. We're gonna put all this together and see how it is, and see how it lines up, and just get the brakes on it, drive it, and see if we think it needs anything else. Sometimes these are baby steps. You just gotta approach it, start chipping away at it, and see where it lands you. So that's what we're doing. All right, stay tuned. I'm gonna put all this stuff together. I'm not gonna film every step of this. It's boring. Plus it's hard to keep filming and working, and I'll just try to keep you briefed as we go here. And I got to keep stoking the fire in here. I've got this little heater going. Got my fire going. Got my fire going. If any of y'all have been following my channel, you know I just put this stove in. I'm playing with fire management. Come on, door. This is an antique stove. I popped these holes in it. They've been getting bigger and bigger. Just to trying to manage airflow into this thing. It doesn't like to breathe, and they will be eventually where I can close them off. Anyway, you're not here to watch my stove video. You're here to watch this Jeep video. So we're gonna keep working on it here, and check back. I'll run into another snag. They shorted me one tie rod in, and this end of this bar doesn't have any threads in it. This end does. So your tie rod end threads into that, and then you cinch it down. Threads, no threads, no bueno. Damn, man, always something. All right, so I went to the parts store and got straightened out on some of this stuff. I got the adjusting sleeve sent that has the threads in both ends of it, instead of the one that, you know, they originally sent me just only tapped on one end. Can't do shit with that, so I've flipped it. Got the pitman arm ball joint that they sent me a pitman arm, which I don't need. So I got the pitman arm tie rod in. Excuse me, I said ball joint, I think. Just kind of got it set up here. Kind of mocked up about the same length as the one that was in it, even though this arm was pretty badly bent, and the one that was in it. So we got a new rod end, new adjusting sleeve, new tie rod ends. This link comes with a tie rod end on it. These are just mounted up loosely, so I'll have to get my sleeve. I got two tie rod ends. I got the brake pads too for the front, which they left off the order, so I couldn't do the brakes the other night. I couldn't get anything done. Man, fighting the cold, fighting wrong parts. I had the wrong crankshaft sensor, which I think I'm going to break out into a separate little video, and then include it in this one as well as a complete. Anyway, this is the link. It's still in the bag. I'm about to take it out. So the first one I got had threads in one end, but did not have any in the other end. I mean, I probably could have tapped it, but I mean, I shouldn't have to. Just give me one that's already tapped. I mean, that's what I paid for. So it wasn't the parts guy's fault. I mean, hell, it's not their fault at all that the part wasn't tapped. Kind of their fault that they left the brake pads off the order and gave me a pitman arm instead of the tie rod end that goes to the pitman arm, but that's all right. You know, not the end of the world. This wasn't a rush job, although it's been sitting here forever because of my, you know, getting sick and all before. But we're chipping away at it. So I got that one arm in. I'm about to put my tie rod ends in that deal, and they just screw in the end. And so I'll get that installed. Got the linkage put up. I just have to, I haven't tightened any of this stuff yet. I'm going to tighten the tie rod ends. I'm not going to tighten up any of this because I've got to still make an adjustment for the alignment. So I'll hit all that stuff. I got the grease zerks installed on all the tie rod ends. I got to put the steering stabilizer in, and then I'll tighten all this stuff down, and that'll be it. Besides the alignment, you can see how there's no gaps in this steering. If you remember, in the steering, that the linkages that were on before, the bars were all rubbing because this was bent way down, which was making this all tight right through here. I'm sure it didn't dry. I didn't drive it very far because it drove really poorly. And the radiator's leaking. That's always great. 20-year-old Jeep. It's gonna be always be something. Always something with a 20-year-old Jeep. Oh well. Just gotta take baby steps with these things and just fix them as they fail. That's the first time I've seen it drip. Zerks tightened, cotter pins, Zerk tightened cotter pin, stabilizers on, Zerk tightened cotter pin, same as the above. All right, all I gotta do is an alignment there. So it's onto a brake job, and then we just kind of start working out the little quirks. Hopefully everything goes well. Okay, so doing the brakes on the Jeep. And if you're ever doing brakes, I highly recommend that you go ahead and suck the dirty fluid that's in the master cylinder out. Just take a turkey baster. You can get in there. Get this old hydraulic fluid out of there. And this one is going to be... There we go. Just get as much out as I can before I start collapsing the pistons back in the calipers. So, because that's gonna, when you do that, it's gonna push fluid up here, right? And if you start off with a full master cylinder, then when you start collapsing those pistons, it's gonna push fluid out of the master cylinder and make a big mess anyway. So and this turkey baster is a little big for this little master cylinder, so I can't get a lot out that way. And I've got a little hose on a vacuum pump. I could pump the rest of it out. I'm gonna leave that there. I'm gonna collapse the pistons and the calipers, and it'll make the fluid level come up even more. Then I'll suck it out again, and I'll get everything I can out at that point. I might use my little vacuum pump and suck everything out of there. And then when I refill it with new, and you pump the brake pedal, it puts new fluid down, and then you can do a quicker bleed at the calipers and the wheel cylinders in the back, and go ahead and flush the rest of the fluid that's in the lines out. So it's good to start with good fresh fluid, especially on an old vehicle like this that's been sitting around, and you know, revamping the steering, revamping the brakes. We want to get a good feel for this thing, and make sure he's got a good pedal and good steering. Matco one, I believe. Don't remember. Let's see. I don't see who it's made by. Anyway. Just push this piston back in, which at the same time is going to be pushing fluid back up into that master cylinder. Alright, if you follow the channel, you've seen me use these big pliers before, and you've probably also seen me use this screwdriver before. Stick it in here and pull back, but I didn't have any leverage points on this one, so I had to use the brake caliper tool, and it works great. So this thing also clock in like rear calipers that have parking brakes built into them. It's a great little tool to have. If you don't have that in your tool arsenal, and you do brakes on a regular basis, that's a good one to have. So I'll pop this pad out here. And these pads are good and thick still, but these rotors are hammered. I don't know what brand pads these are. So I'm just starting fresh with new pads, new rotors, because everything's hammered. I don't want to try to seat these old pads into the new rotors, especially not knowing what brand they are and what they're made out of. So we're putting a quality ceramic pad on, and hopefully you'll have a good brake pedal and the damn thing will stop. All right. Take some brake clean, spray your rotor off, which I just did. Get the packing oil off. I already popped the old one off. It was a little rusted on there. I had to smack it with the sledge, which is fairly normal. And on these old ones, they don't have the bracketry, like the little tins that slide over. And matter of fact, I'm gonna pull this rotor back off. If you'll see, it might be hard for you to see that there's an indentation there, and it's where the pad is set in there. It's worn a groove, and that pad will have trouble sliding back and forth because of that. So I'll take a Ziz wheel and we will grind that back flat. So we're gonna clean these grooves up. We'll spray it off a little bit. Cut down on some of the dust. We'll just take a brown Scotch-Brite cookie and got a pretty good sized groove in it. See where I've been grinding it, and it still has a little bit of an indentation there, and that's where the pads have been riding. But if they have a groove they're going to get caught on, then they're not going to slide where they're supposed to, you know, when the caliper's compressing, the caliper's pinching. If these are getting hung up, which they absolutely were in that hole, that was a pretty big groove, and it's got another one here that I'm going to have to grind out. It's got just a little more I'm going to take down. I'm going to smooth it back out, polish that back out. That's good and polished. It will that pad will slide better, and you'll have better braking. I know I took some meat off of there, and it's got a little bit of a warp to it. Not warp, but where I took the material out to get that notch out. But it's necessary, because if I didn't, that pad would have just been stuck in that groove. And sometimes with what I'm doing, you'll cause a little bit of you know, a tolerance issue with a pad, and it can cause a little bit of a what am I trying to say? A little bit of a rattle, I guess, in the pad. But if that does become a problem, you can get brake lube, which is like a anti-seize with copper and brass or something in it, and paint this stuff with that. And we'll get this thing polished out a little bit further, and I'm gonna work on the bottom, and then we'll put this thing together. Top bracket's polished out pretty good. It's nice and slick. I lightly hit the bottom section. You can kind of see that indentation now that I've knocked a little bit of that rust off. And I'll polish this out real quick. And you'll go through a few of these little things, and you could probably use a more of aggressive grinding wheel, but I try not to take too much material off these things. The least amount, the better. So if you didn't know about that little trick, that's very helpful. You don't want to have indentions in your caliper bracket for the slides, so true that up if you can. All right, got it polished back out, slick, slides good. Not too much of a tolerance. You'll get a pad walk sometimes like that. But you can see I got the grooves knocked out. Metal's nice and slick. Got all the rust off of it for the most part. I mean, there's some fine pitting down in here, but the brake pads don't slide on that. So you want them to be slick. This pack actually did come with, I didn't see that in the box. When I worked at the dealer, I worked at the Jeep dealer when these were new, and they didn't have these little pieces back then. So they do have the little metal tabs. Well, it came with a lot of them. They're in different thicknesses. Okay. That's a 015, that's a 025. So I guess you play around with these pads, and if you need shims and to take up that slack, you can do that. That's a great idea. I'm just going to put one in the top. That takes the slack out and still allows the pad to slide. We're going to go with that. So I got 1/10,000th shim in. These are the Wagner premium pads. Alright, let's go with a 10 on that. That's a 15. That's a 10,000th. I think that's good. 2 10s. These have a hole these pads kind of drop into. Well, that didn't stay on good. Pinch that, tighten it up a little bit. Slides are good. All right, should be good. bolts in. First time for everything. That's the first time I've ran those kind of shims. I'm gonna pinch them. I think I'm gonna pinch them down a little bit. Hopefully they'll stay on there. I think we're good to go. New rotor, new pads, polished brackets, and new clips. We're set. Do the other side, suck the fluid out, do the backs. Move on to the back. We'll talk about that a little bit. Drum brakes are not my favorite. I hate doing drum brakes. Horse and buggy technology. I wish they would have dropped those in the 60s. When they figured out disc brakes on the front of a car, I don't know why they didn't figure it out for all four wheels back then, but people are still using drum brakes. They work and they're cheap, but they're a pain in the butt. They don't stay in adjustment. They're a pain in the ass to change. I just don't like them. But it is what it is, and that's what this vehicle's got, so that's what I'm going to do. We're going to replace the rear brakes. All right, we got the steering, the brakes back on. I got it set up to do an alignment. Just a recap. Did the linkages, stabilizer shock. I did the end links, which I didn't film. Sway bar end links, they were shot. Rotors and pads. I just put the drums on the back because the shoes look brand new. Shoes look brand new, and I don't think the shoes are causing my brake pedal pulsation. I think it was all the drums. So what we'll do is just give it a test drive after I get the alignment squared away, and if it still pulsates out of the pedal, then I'll look further. But I'm just going to take the money off the ticket and send the shoes back, because I mean they're brand new and it was different in the front. But I really wanted to put the new pads on with the rotors in the front. It's a little different in the back. But we had some massive brake pedal pulsation when I was driving this thing. Like, you hit the brakes, the steering wheel not only would shake violently, it would pulsate the pedal up and down real bad. So that's the pedal pulsation is usually from the rear. The steering wheel shake is usually from the front, or always from the front. So I'm gonna get the steering straightened out on my old Hunter. I haven't measured caster and camber and all that good stuff yet. I'm about to do that now. I'll follow the steps, make the adjustments, and hopefully we'll have a nice straight driving vehicle if nothing's bent like a frame or control arm or anything like that. All right. Okay, I've been playing with this thing, playing with the toe. The caster and camber were even right out of the gate. I didn't have to fool with that at all, but it took me just a little bit to get the toe in even, nice and even. Steering wheel is locked down up there, so it should be nice and straight. Steering wheel should be straight. Yeah. Good to go. Got my fancy little steering wheel holder in place. This old alignment rack isn't the smoothest. My turn tables, those pivot when you unpin it, so when you're adjusting your alignment, the wheels are turning around, you know, smoothly supposed to be, but I haven't cleaned those things in a decade probably, so I need to take the plates out and clean all the grit out and re-grease the bearings in there and make it nice and fluid again. As far as, I mean, the thing still does good alignments. The only problem with this old alignment rack is the old school way it clamps. It's a rim clamp. The new ones clamp on the outside of the tire so it doesn't scratch any wheels. These were great on older cars that didn't have painted wheels, especially, you know, old steel wheels or aluminums like this. You start getting into the newer stuff and it just doesn't work over 20s. I mean, I can do a dually on there. I can do up to a 20-inch wheel, but I don't like to do anything fancy, any fancy wheels, because I just don't want the liability of scratching them. So it'd be awesome to have a newer Hunter alignment rack that had the fancy heads and stuff, but with clamp to the tire. But these old rim clamps, you're limited with the modern stuff. All right, so I went and drove the TJ. This is the next day after I did the alignment. I ended up dropping the oil last night. I checked the oil and it was really dirty. And it had trouble starting up after it sat for a few days on the rack while I was doing the steering and brakes and stuff. So I'm not sure what was going on with that, but today it's no problems. It's been starting right up. But I went and drove it. It drives great. Steering wheel's straight. Doesn't track around. I mean, it's got small tires on it still, so they still drive good when they still have the small tires. You start putting lift kits on them and wider tires, and they start becoming a little bit of a white knuckle ride on the highway, but on some of them. But anyway, it drives good. Everything seems to work except for the blinkers stopped working while I was driving it. Had the blinker on, merging onto the highway. I just wanted to jump on the highway for a couple exits and see how it felt. And as I was merging, the blinkers started staying solid lit. So I don't know if we got a flasher switch, relay deal, something like that's not working. But and the back brakes are a little tight. I could smell the back brakes when I pulled back into the driveway, and so I'm gonna back those off a couple clicks and see if I see anything with the blinker deal and go drive it again. I think that's it on this one. I mean, the radiator's leaking from this top tank. These are bad about this. They'll leak across this top seal. Especially if you run them slam full. It's expansion tank's okay. It's not over full. It didn't overheat. Everything seemed to work. I believe the air conditioning was even working. I switched from heat to AC and it got pretty chilly, although it's only like 55 degrees today, or 50. Drive belt's cracking. It needs a serpentine belt. Oh yeah, and the oil pressure gauge was pegged when I first started it up. It stayed at 80 for probably the first 10 or 15 minutes that I drove it. These things don't build that kind of oil pressure. So these 4-liter motors are notorious, and pretty much all Chrysler products are notorious for the oil pressure sending unit going bad. That's sends a signal from the engine to the gauge to tell where the oil pressure's at. A lot of times they'll go back and forth, or they'll stick pegged out, or they'll stick dead. These things typically run around 40 psi. I think minimum specs like 13 psi or something like that. But if you got one that low, then you've got some bearing damage. Unless the sending unit's bad, or your gauge could be bad, but it's usually the sending unit. I've done a million of them on these. So I'm gonna see if he wants me to do it while it's here. I don't know if he wants to address that radiator. It's not terrible, but it does have a little leak. Does need a belt. Other than that, I think it's good. So steering wheel's nice and straight, drives good. I think that's it. Like I said, I'm gonna adjust the brakes on it and That'll be it. Hey man, hit the subscribe button if you don't mind. Give me a like. Thanks for watching. Stick around. Check my channel out for more content. Peace and have a good day.